Welcome back to the It's Bigger Than Me podcast. I'm your host, Molly Trotter Gomez. You guys are in for a treat. I don't think I've had a guest like this on the show, like at all. This is a woman that really is fighting for the rights. And she said a really powerful phrase right before we hit record, talking about having a child-centric perspective while in the voting booth. So you can probably guess what she is passionate about. But I have Katy Faust here. I'm very excited to have her on the show. What you're talking about, Katy, just on your platform, in your books, everywhere, are things that people need to know. Because if we don't know, how do we know how to accurately vote and who we have next that comes in office? So this is a very important topic, and I'm excited to dive in. But go ahead and share a little bit of background on yourself before we jump in today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate you bringing attention to what was going to be a lot of different critical issues that intersect with the rights, well-being, and interest of children. I never intended to be involved in some of the hottest culture war topics that's trending in our day-to-day. But honestly, it was around the marriage debate when we first started talking about the definition of marriage that I decided, somebody needs to get in and represent the well-being of children, the interest of children, especially because it became very clear to me that in that conversation, the focus was obsessively about the adults and what they wanted, whereas, children just had to live with and deal with whatever it was that we decided, when it came to the political definition of marriage. And so that's when I said, kids need a voice. We really need to start advocating on behalf of children. I think a lot of us might be familiar with the fact that children have a right to life, and we are battling to defend children who are unborn. But children also have rights on this side of the womb, and that's what my nonprofit, Them Before Us, focuses on, is defending children's right to life, absolutely, but also their right to be known and loved by their mother and father whenever possible. Their right to an intact, unmedicalized body so that they are not subjected to these harmful, irreparably damaging treatments in the name of transgender medicine. Their right to innocence, the right to not have their childhood adulterated and stolen from them through graphic materials like nonstop pornography coming into their pocket through their smartphone, or innocence violating sex ed curriculum, or even highly sexualized displays through things like state funded drag queen story hours. And so we are at Them Before Us focused on defending the fundamental rights of children. And I'll tell you what, like I tell people, give me enough time and I'll trigger you too. I mean, like everything that we are talking about, the idea that you need to prioritize children, defend children, elevate their rights above what you want, is going to infringe at some point on what an adult desires for their own life. But that is how it has to be. That is what child protection requires. And if we want to have any measure of social thriving, we must first secure individual child thriving. So that's our work at Them Before Us. We center the child in all these conversations.
Well, I love that you said, let me talk long enough and I'll trigger you. The minute our mutual friend connected us, I did my due diligence and I was like, oh yeah, there's going to be triggering all over the place. But this is good because why have we spent this long and not address some of these issues? And I know there's been advocacies and people really fighting against it, but really like there's a lot more noise coming out about it because we're seeing just the damaging effects. So I love what you stand for. I know not everybody's going to be here for it, but I definitely am here for it. A lot of my listeners are too. And you give them courage by saying, you know what, here's my passion. Here's the promise. Here's what we're going after. And I love it. So I mean, gosh, there's so many different issues that affect the child. Is there anything specific that you guys are really focusing on? I mean, there's a wide variety, but I would love to go wherever you want to lead when it comes to one of these issues.
The core topics that we tackle at Them Before Us, the topic of our first book, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement, takes this child-centric perspective and applies it to all marriage and family issues. So that is sort of the core of our work, because if you cannot secure a child's fundamental rights within the family, you really will doom them to a whole host of socioeconomic risks, physical risks. Children being raised by their married mother and father will exempt them from the greatest social ills that we are facing today, whether it is child poverty, teen homelessness, increased suicide risk, high school dropouts, criminal activity, teen pregnancy. There really is no major issue that we are battling, that we are striving to resolve, that cannot first be primarily addressed by their family structure, by their own mother and father choosing to do hard things on their behalf, by committing to one another and committing to the child. And obviously, we are not saying that there's no way for children to overcome those challenges, but we're very, very clear there are increased challenges. So what it means to put children first in matters of marriage and family, if we understand the importance of children being raised by their married mother and father whenever possible, that gives us the correct definition of marriage. It actually gives us some insight into divorce and how much we need to limit divorce whenever possible. It actually gives us the critique of a whole host of varieties of modern families. Whereas, honestly, from the child's perspective, a modern family is just code for child loss. That means the child has to lose something to be in that family, and that's an injustice. It actually gives us the insight that we need to properly address and dissect these questions around reproductive technologies, whether it's IVF, whether it's sperm and egg donation, whether it's surrogacy. You elevate the rights and well-being of children, and you understand that those technologies need to be rejected in almost every case. And it gives us the proper understanding of adoption, that adoption isn't about adults. Adoption is about children. Adoption is about making sure that their rights, their needs, their desires are met. They are the client. It's not about us, the adults. And I say that as an adoptive mom, as somebody who used to be the former director at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. Adoption's for kids. It's not for us. And so I would say that that is primarily where we focus. And I would say certainly where we began. The challenge is that children's rights are under attack in almost every way that children can be under attack. Not just their right to life, which is pretty apparent, not just their right to their mother and father, but also all of these other rights. So our work has grown and expanded to, our most recent project that is about to come out, depending on when this airs, but September 24th. And what we did with this project is we said, actually, it's not just cultural issues that have to do with child protection. It's fiscal issues, it's national issues, it's issues of immigration, it's issues of corporate policy. And so we conscripted 19 subject matter experts to adopt the them before us framework, the put kids before adults framework, and then apply that to every major political issue. And we got it out just in time for the election.
Wow, that is, yes, I'm so glad because we definitely need a change, a big change come this November. That is for sure. So I know you mentioned that you worked tirelessly to be able to get that out. And so just whatever this is worth, thank you. Thank you for being able to create that framework. I love frameworks, and especially to have one so impactful where it's getting to then again, focus on the child. So I have a question for you, a lot, and we've seen this a lot of, selfishness, you can maybe call it something else, where adults are thinking of adults first, and then whatever happens to the kids is what happens, when our responsibility as parents should be to protect the child first. What do you think could be maybe a good takeaway or something that adults listening to this could really be able to, maybe it's part of the framework or something that they can adopt in what they're doing so it gets it off of them and onto the ones that they're protecting? I'd be super curious about that.
Well, you have hit the nail on the head. We actually do, because even though we move in all of these different spaces, from reproductive technologies to studying family structure to now moving into the realm of economics and debt and national security and foreign policy and ESG and DEI, all of which are addressed in Pro-Child Politics, our new book, you really can boil this down to one simple framework, like you said, and it is, who's doing the hard thing? Are the adults doing the hard thing, or are the children doing the hard thing? And I would say that them before us has more influence than we deserve, because we have been able to distill down these complex issues into something that is understandable and actionable, right? That we have been able to take this very simple template, put kid first, and apply it to all these different, a huge variety of political, economic, and cultural issues. And it makes it very easy to understand what the problem is and what the adult's responsibility within that problem really results in. And what we see in all of these different issues is somebody is going to do the hard thing. Either our politicians are going to figure out how to balance the budget and keep their spending in check, which is hard, or you're going to force kids to pay for that, signature library. And, they're already saddled with about $70,000 of debt right at the moment that they're born. Who's going to do the hard thing? Somebody's going to do the hard thing. Is it going to be the politicians? Or is it going to be the infant that was just born? You can look at it in matters of marriage and family. Like my husband was a pastor for 25 years. We've done lots and lots of counseling for couples that are struggling. In those situations, you can say, look, we've got some challenges. We've got, some addiction issues, porn addiction, for example, or financial struggles, or we're just not getting along, or we've got this childhood baggage. I just think it's best if we go our separate ways. Well, now you're saying we refuse to do the hard thing of working on our marriage. We refuse to go to the counseling, get the accountability that we need, do the hard work of mending our marriage. We're going to have the kids do the hard thing instead. They're going to do the hard thing of living in two different homes, two different lives, split personalities in 50% of the cases. In every major challenge that we are looking at today, somebody will do the hard thing. Either it will be the adults whose shoulders are broader, whose minds are developed, who actually have the volition to decide and determine their course of action, or we will offload the hard thing onto the children who cannot object, who cannot advocate for themselves, who do not vote, who cannot blog, who don't do interviews. And we will simply say, we're going to live as we please. You do the hard thing. And unfortunately, that seems to be the route that we have taken in nearly every cultural, economic, and political issue of our day.
It's very, very prevalent. And one of the things I know my husband and I talked about was, with all of that, we haven't had kids yet. We've been married for 4 years, and I'm actually grateful because there's a lot that's going on, and there's a lot that we get to heal from being a newly married couple. But we sat down and we're like, how are we going to have these different kinds of conversations with our kids? And we came to this conclusion of so many parents do not want to have these hard conversations of express how you feel. Where is this coming from? Where did you see that? And really sitting in it, even if nothing's said, and then also not being, offended at whatever they say and taking responsibility of they're learning from something or someone. So either let the world teach them, you teach them, you have these hard conversations. And so again, another reason why I'm glad we haven't had kids, because we get to talk about these things rather than a lot of people, and hey, to each their own. They get married, they instantly had kids, wasn't our path. And the longer we wait, the more I'm like, we get to heal from that. We get to grow in that wisdom. We get to be surrounded by, really amazing people that can speak into us who've had kids. So that kind of conversation of what are the parents doing to sit these kids down, to really work things out, even though you probably had a hard day, imagine what they're going through. And they're like, they're developing, like you said, still. So I love that we're going down this route because there's a lot of responsibility that has to be taken. And a lot of people like, it's just too hard. Well, yes, but this is what it means to lead. This is what it means to be a parent. And again, I'm not a parent, but I have definitely led many people in the different careers that I have been in. So there's some similarities, but I know they're different.
Well, let me jump in there and say, I'm an activist for a living. I'm a crusader on behalf of children's rights. Like that is what I do for my official vocation. On the other side, I have raised 4 kids in Seattle, largely in public schools. And everybody is like, how on earth did you do it? And they don't hate you, and they don't have purple hair. And, they are standing strong, and they have been able to find their way, not just like surviving, but thriving. I get that question so much because I travel all across the country and all across the world, and people freak. They're like, I don't understand how you in Seattle with the 4 kids and everybody's okay. I'm like, they're awesome. They're not just okay, they're awesome. So our second book is called Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. And my co-author, Stacy, and I sort of outline what are some of the principles, what are some of the formats, the formulas that we have used to instill a conservative, rational, biblical, well-grounded, well-fortified worldview in our kids at every age, especially on the hottest topics that they're facing today. And I never talk about that book. It outsells all my other books. Because everybody's like, oh my gosh, I need this. It's basically, how do you pass on your worldview in a culture where everybody's lying to your kids? So you are thinking about the right things. You are thinking about how do you have those conversations with your kids? You mentioned something like letting them process. We have a name for that. It's called the no flinch rule, right? When your kid says something shocking or horrifying, you keep your face calm, right? You just say, oh, tell me about that. Where'd you hear about that? I want to hear more, because your goal is to be as connected as possible, because there is no worldview transmission if you don't have wide open communication. So I would just say, if any of you guys are in the process of raising kids, it doesn't matter if you're in a red state or a blue state or homeschool or private school or public school, like there is no more important work right now as a parent than fortifying your children against the cultural lies, which literally will destroy them if they have the chance.
That was that book I saw on your website. I was like, oh, like that was the easiest. I mean, there's so many different topics I could have picked. I was like, I bet you might go there. And then you had another book, but it makes a whole lot of sense why that particular book, Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. I grew up in Oregon, so I get it. And then I moved out of Oregon and California, call it woke, but I live in a little red pocket, but there's still California all around it and all the things. And it's like you learn to be like, what can we do to make this situation better? Again, rather than the world teaching our kids, let's have the no flinch rule. I love that because I can only imagine just some of these. I mean, if my parents did that with me, they would probably be flinching a lot, being like, I went from private school, first through eighth grade, to public high school and kind of like went off the deep end because I just got exposed to the world. And that is like, I mean, pales in comparison to what kids are going through now.
Yeah.
So that's powerful. Now, as we're kind of like wrapping this up a little bit, this is so good. I mean, I could have you on here 4 hours. Like, what are some things like we've touched on a lot of really great things? Is there anything else you'd love to leave us with? And then obviously we'll have links in the show notes for you guys to go check out those books. Because clearly these are ones that are like right now, like read it right now as we're going through this election season, educate yourself, be aware, perfectly timely. But is there anything else you'd love to leave us with?
Well, just to say that kids can't advocate for themselves. It is up to adults to do that. The problem is most adults are too self-interested to actually prioritize kids above them. So we need an army of adults who are willing to sacrifice what they want for the sake of prioritizing kids. And I think a lot of us don't necessarily because nobody did it for us when we were kids. I mean, we are the generation of family breakdown. We were kind of well, at least me, in the 80s and 90s, we were part of the divorce epidemic, where very few parents, I mean, statistically, that was the highest rates of divorce. And so we were put not first, I'm not saying last, but a lot of us didn't have our rights and our needs respected when we were kids. And so then you move into adulthood and you think, well, that's the pattern. I don't have to respect the rights and needs of my kids. Or we are in this sort of me-centric self-worship, I would say, epoch of American history, where if you want it, you desire it, or it's your identity, or it's your feelings, that's elevated to the status of God. But the problem is that when your sexual, especially sexual, romantic, personal, monetary safety feelings are elevated to the top, somebody else is likely going to pay that price. And it very, very often is the demographic that can't fight back, which is kids. So we need an army of adults to rise up and defend them, obviously on the personal areas where it impacts our life. But we also need to start taking this child protective lens into all of our conversations, into the courtrooms, into the Thanksgiving dinners, into the voting booth. And that is what we tried to do in our most recent project, is say, how can you take this lens of child protection, of prioritizing them before us, children before adults, in all of these different topics, whether it's race or policing or religious liberty, or ESG or immigration or national security or the economy or the environment or energy. I mean, we conscripted all of these subject matter experts to boil it down to 3,000 words so that you can understand what happens to kids when we get energy policy wrong, or what happens to kids when we believe the lies about ESG and DEI. There are very real consequences for children when we believe the lies, and it needs to end. It needs to end for the sake of the individual child, but it needs to end so that we actually have a country, people. We need to start like literally building back better, and you do that child by child.
Beautiful. I mean, I don't know what else needs to be said. I mean, you're an amazing speaker. You obviously talk on this topic a lot, and it shows how just passionate and powerful that is, and just how important the message is. Like, there is a sincerity in your voice of like, this is urgent. This isn't for later. This isn't for somebody else. This isn't when you feel like it. It's a right now thing, whether you have kids or not. Like, everybody has a voice, and it's time for more voices to be heard. So, Katy, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? We'll have stuff in the show notes, but please, what are the best places that people can find you if they want to learn more?
I'm on X so much X. So that's really the place where you share all my opinions, but come to thembeforeus.com, subscribe to thembeforeus.com, give to this mission. We really need, like I said, we need people marching shoulder to shoulder. There is so much opportunity. We are turning down requests for our help from legislators across the country who are trying to fight on behalf of kids, from influencers who want us to help shape their message or join their call or write this article. Like, we really need to put kids front and center, and there's nobody doing that like them before us. So please come. We need you. We want you to join our team.
I love it. Katie, thank you so much for your time today. I truly, truly value it.
Yeah, it's great talking.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. It means the world to me that you would lean in, listen in, and be able to hear the value that's being shared on this show. Don't forget, if you love this episode, rate the show, leave me a review, be sure to share it with a friend, and don't forget to tag me on social media. I will definitely be giving you a shout out. Also, come say hi, drop in the DMs. I would love to be able to hear what stood out to you the most on the episode, and if there's any topics that you would like to hear on the show. We'll see you next time.